Welcome to the week 1 through 5 recap of the Wooper Club Season 9. We are just about halfway through, so we thought we'd take a little bit to kind of recap the season so far, go over some things that we've learned or discovered about the season, about ourselves, and share it with all of you. Joining me, of course, is my co-host Steve, coach of the Waterdeep Wobbuffets.
Hello, everyone.
And once again, as well, Michael, coach of the Route 1 Birbs.
Hey, good to be here.
So the first thing we obviously have to talk about with is such a complex system that we're going on with. Steve, we expected a lot of issues with scheduling. That getting 4 people together at the same time is pretty rough. As one of our commissioners, someone who kind of oversees that process, what has been your experience so far with that?
So far, I think at the start of the season, everything was pretty good. Everyone really bought into starting with scheduling everything a week ahead, and with doing that, we were able to get battles scheduled and played. However, as we got later into the season, kind of that week ahead scheduling mentality faded, and some of the games have been tried to schedule a little more last second. That has led to some matches not being played. We had talked about it, and so there were 2 matches that missed kind of their week deadline, and we gave them until the end of the bye. One of them has been played so far. One of them might be being played by the end of the bye. We're not quite there yet, so we'll see about that. But all in all, in general, everyone's doing a good idea. Good job with it. I'm hoping we can kind of pick back up with the scheduling coming out of this bye week with only 3-week bursts, and we'll see if we're able to keep it going.
I definitely appreciate having the bye week here. It just happened to be pretty good timing here with the holiday season. Kind of using this bye to catch ourselves back up, and hopefully we do get back into that mentality of 1 week ahead and get right back into it. But one thing that may dissuade some people, Michael, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the very first turn of the entire season, which you participated in. Tell us what exactly went down there, and maybe some of the takeaways that we've had from what all that shows or encompasses about the game that we play.
Well, I will say that I did participate in that turn. It was a turn of Pokemon. It was perhaps the most Pokemon turn of Pokemon there is. Where that was I was the inaugural match of the season. Turn 1, my opponents went for a very fast Sunny Day and then Heat Wave from the Solar Power Charizard. I was not prepared for that. My partner was not prepared for that. That was a 100% with the Pokemon we had let out in the boosters. Like that was 100% our loss from that turn. Except the Heat Wave missed both of us because that is the game we subject ourselves to. And I went on to somehow win after that because this season has been a bit of a rock, paper, scissors game, somewhat where, everyone's teams with their partners can do a bunch of different things. You can only prep for so much, and sometimes your opponents just bring what you cannot handle, and sometimes you get really lucky, I guess. That's the game.
That's pretty fair. Maybe it helps us not to take things a little so seriously, right? Things like that can happen, and whoop, the game is flipped on its head very quickly and very suddenly. Like Michael had just said, Steve, we mentioned the sunny day that happened and all the different things to prep for. If I recall right, some genius among us did mention that field effects such as weather would definitely be affecting things such as prep and continue to be relevant. Steve, how does it feel to be so smart?
It feels great. I may have done a little bit of prepping before I had made those comments, specifically against Chad's team, which was very much built around psychic terrain. So I kind of saw a little bit of that firsthand. But yes, even if the opposing team isn't built around terrain or weather and how to exploit it, there are ways to do it. And just having a terrain or weather setter with something to pair it with that can abuse it, it's still just as strong as it is in singles. And of course, Trick Room has shown up a lot. Trick Room being a little more vague in what can abuse it, and everyone tended to draft at least one mon on the slower side. So that, of course, has still been big. We mentioned solar power charger than the sun. We've had some sandstorms, some rain, some electric terrain, psychic terrain, all sorts of things going on to impact and help teammates. So yeah, it'll be exciting to see what else we can see from those moving forward.
And Michael, one thing that people have really done, these are effects that don't last particularly long, especially if you don't tag on things like terrain extender, damp rock, etc. But what I've noticed is a lot of hyper offense, at least at the very beginning of the game, because while we learned it's very important or powerful to be able to take out one person and then move on to the 2v1. I know we've worked together, and that was one of our big strategies, was being able to do that and then just kind of chip away at the one remaining team. What are your thoughts on that, considering the differences between this format and something like VGC?
Oh, it's a major difference that I don't think any of us quite appreciated at the beginning, and then after 1 or 2 weeks, I think everyone at this point has pretty much caught on that. I mean, it just comes down to math. If you, regardless of the number of Pokemon, if you have your partner still on the field and your opponent doesn't, you are taking twice as many turns as your opponents, and it's just an incredibly strong position to be in.
Absolutely, and it doesn't even feel like it's win more like some people may have thought. That is a state that you very much want to get to and achieve, and that in and of itself seems like a win condition. Of course, the one hindrance to that, Steve, as we saw from one particular game I want you to talk to us a little bit about, is breaking through walls. We mentioned a little bit here, hyper offense to get one person down, but there are some ones that it's very tough to break through, even with two people, and especially tough if you get down to one-on-one. Tell us about your matchup against our other admin.
Yeah, so I believe it was week 2. Myself and Matt had a 100-turn battle where for the first 13 or so we both had partners. Both teams had their plans going in, and as we looked at each other, my partner and I identified one of them that we could get through a little easier. They identified they can get through my partner rather easily, and it just ended up me against Matt for 100 turns of just rotating between bulky mons with recovery such as Celesteela, Tapu Fini, Suicune, Incineroar, and Ferrothorn. Just rotating through them. All of them had their favorable matchups. All of them had their matchups they wanted to avoid. I know throughout that I was looking for PP on moves to run out. That was something I was paying close attention to, especially the Ferrothorn. I knew if it ran out of Power Whips and Leech Seeds, then Fini could win. They were very keen on the Protects on Fini because of that. Close attention to the Flamethrower on Celesteela against Ferrothorn, the HP on everything, and it just became a wonderful singles battle where we both had a partner we could call on for help. And unfortunately, at the end, that did not go my way, but it was still quite an exciting battle.
You made it sound a whole lot more exciting than it was to watch, which is pretty impressive to do. That devolved pretty quickly into a format perhaps we were not prepared to take on at the start of the match. Crazy that we had about 100 turns of 1v1. This format has had tons of amazing and excellent surprises. With that said, though, we're going to move on and talk about a few of the coaches and some of the standout teams so far. We have to, of course, first acknowledge the team at the very top, the Close Combat Club, coached by John, is the only undefeated team at this time, 5-0 with a plus 21 differential. We'll probably talk about that a little more in depth in just a bit, but we also kind of agreed the top 4 kind of do stand out. So we're going to move on to the Route 1 Birbs and Michael, 4-1 at plus 14. The Akron Aggrons, coached by Joey, also 4-1 at plus 14. And yours truly, the Buffalo Bouffalant, at 3-1 plus 8. So we each kind of want to talk a little bit about one of the teams that we're very confident in. For me, it is the Close Combat Club, up in 5-0. I got the easy one here, but John's doing an outstanding job swapping, especially between, I would say, Amoonguss, Heatran, and Corviknight, with a little bit of Latias mixed in there. Just the resistances that they have. It's very, very tough to focus down just John. And I think also, considering how important it is to try and take down one person or another, you can very much focus on who has the coverage for John's Mons and play and adapt accordingly. We haven't even seen a lot of things like what Mimikyu can do in this kind of format. Scrafty, one of his very early picks, hasn't really done much of anything. We haven't even seen Bellydrum Azumarill. I think he can still keep getting better, which is insane for a team that is 5-0 with this insane differential. Steve, which team do you want to talk about amongst these top four?
So the team I will shout out is Joey and his Akron Aggrons. Fantastic start to the season, 4-1. Strong performance as he tends to do in the regular season. It's kind of become a staple powerhouse of the regular season, and then come playoffs, we'll see how that goes for him. But you know, so far, only loss against other teams in the top four when they were together against my two co-hosts here. Every other game so far he's won. He has had some decent partners so far, which could play into his success. But all his team, the Landorus Therian, of course, excellent, putting in a ton of work. Most notably, the dual Landorus was very fun to see. But yeah, Joey's done spectacular so far. I don't see any reason why he could miss the playoffs at this point.
Very true. And Michael, who would you like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I could throw my hat in the ring, but of the teams we mentioned, I have to go with you and the Bouffalants, Nate. I mean, to me, looking at all these top teams, it comes in, to just consistency and your strength as a coach, the strength of your team. I don't see you having any problem finishing out an incredibly strong record. I mean, you handed me my only loss of the season so far, so you better do real well. Otherwise, I look like a fool.
That's the best compliment I could hope for, and I appreciate that. But there are a few more coaches still in the hunt. We have 8 of the 12 coaches making the playoffs. We've talked about 4. Here are some others that we've kind of indicated or thought of as being close together or a little bunched up right now. Perhaps the surprise of the season, we've got Steviemallia here, 3-2 -1. Summit County Psyducks at 2-3 -1. Seattle Steamrollers 2-3 -1. The Newport Noctowls 2-2 -2. Your Waterdeep Wobbuffets 2-3 -6, and the Cincinnati Incineroar 1-3 with a -11, but still with some solid performances so far. So we each want to talk about one of these that we're pretty high on. I'm going to circle back to the Newport Noctowls, coached by Elf Owls, who is the winner of our previous season, which admittedly was singles. I think Jimmy has had he has an amazing team. I think his teammates haven't quite done him as many favors as they could, especially considering the coaches that he still has yet to work with. I love his remaining schedule. I love the way he approaches the game. Being able to work with him just a little bit here already. GNC is just an absolute powerhouse. Everything else can work around it so well. He has so many interesting and good options. I think he has a pretty clear path to the playoffs, and honestly, if we look at which matches we would be favored in or not, there's a chance he could still make it into the top 4, I think, relatively easily. Steve, who do you want to talk about?
I'd like to give a shout out to Steviemallia. Stevie came in as one of the lower seeds after a not great performance in his previous season, and he has definitely shattered those expectations. Coming in here, 3-2, really strong start. Looking at his schedule he's had so far, he also hasn't been paired with too many of the top coaches and still has a lot of great pairings coming up in the second half of the season. Looking at his team, Dragapult, of course, the strong presence there, putting in a lot of work. Buzzwole, I recall just kind of being a physical wall in one battle that just shut down the opponent's team. Nihilego has come a couple times. Grimmsnarl and the screens from there. Lots of options on the team that have really worked well with his team. And after working with him on our battle, kind of his thought process during the battle and decision making in the battle and prep for the battle, I think really are paying off for him, and it's showing in the standings.
Absolutely true. Again, I think we mentioned it during the original show that together the team looks kind of off or weird, but being able to work with him and work with these individual pieces has been an absolute blast so far. So big shout out to Stevie for exceeding all of our expectations already. And Michael, who would you like to give a shout out to from these coaches that we mentioned?
I have to throw my weight back behind the ultra-based team once again. Steven, I think you're gonna pick out the rest of your season. I think had a little bit of a harder opening to your season, and your strength of a coach, the strength of your Pokemon, I cannot see you not climbing several places by the end of the season. I think a lot of these teams kind of here in the middle of the pack, we're going to see, what coaches can kind of make use of essentially, the depth of their Pokemon going into some of these rematches and pairing with even more people, how far and inventive can you stretch your team? And I think Steve is a person who's just going to really flourish in that scenario.
And I seem to recall him doing something very similar last season. This season he started 0-3 and has won 2 in a row with a strong schedule moving forward. I believe last season something very similar happened where he's able to climb up the ranks in a very similar manner. So definitely want to keep an eye on. And we appreciate, this is why we have you on, is that you can tell us how great we are. So keep that up, Michael. We'll invite you back more often.
Yes, please continue paying me.
So wait, you're getting paid? So the end here, we're going to kind of go over maybe a couple of hot takes, some things that we're expecting to see the rest of the season that maybe aren't going to be popular opinions. And I'm going to start us out with something spicy. We're going to start here near the bottom. The 11 seed Boulder Bulldoors are 0-5, but I am confident that Sasbo will be able to turn this season around. And by the end of Week 11, we're going to see him over in the 8 seed. Yes, he has started off very poorly, very slowly. I think if you look at some of his matches, not particularly great for him. I think he's going to have a little more time available. I think people are going to figure out how to use some of these amazing mons he has just a little bit better, especially seeing the recent transaction to Rotom Wash. I think did a lot for his team. I think he'll be able to use Arcanine quite well. People are going to love what you can do with Whimsicott. I think there's a real shot that this winless team will end up in the playoffs. Steve, why don't you tell us about one of your hot takes? What are you expecting to see the rest of the season that maybe we aren't?
Oh, man. I recall thinking of something before we started recording, and let me tell you, my mind's drawing a blank right now. Michael, why don't you go ahead right now as I try and remember this?
All right, I need to stretch for time. Well, Nate, I have a hot take. I think my hot take is going to be a big ol' prayer that I think we're going to play all of the rest of the matches of the season. At the beginning we mentioned scheduling has been a little bit of a problem in recent weeks, but, with smaller chunks between bye weeks, between people's matchups and records getting closer and the matches getting a little more important, I think people are just going to be a bit more on top of the whole scheduling game, and we're going to see a strong finish from everyone getting things done in timely manners.
I think another factor that can help with that too potentially is even in the very last week, we're still going to have standings that matter, because remember, it's the 1 and 2 coaches together, the 3 and 4 coaches together. So even if you say I've clinched playoffs, it's fine. Your standings within that very much matters for who you're going to be paired with in the playoffs. So perhaps it's a little more incentive to finish off the matches and finish the season strong when we get there a little bit later. Steve, was that enough time that we bought for you, or would you like us to continue on to the finish?
I forget what my original take was, but related to this, I know moving into the season, there was discussions about, towards the end of the season, maybe trying to throw a little to get your preferred partner in the playoffs. And I'll say, hot take is none of that will work. You'll try and throw for it, and unless you're the last battle, something's going to go wrong.
That could definitely be true. I would love to. There are a couple coaches I would very much love to try and get with them for the playoffs. I wonder, we might be right about how difficult that's going to be to accomplish.
Especially with how close the middle of the pack is right now. If the middle continues to be kind of clunked like it is, it'll come down to plus minus at the end, and trying to account for that is going to be very tricky on these last couple of weeks.
Hopefully we'll get to see something like a team full of explosion users to maybe pick up the KOs needed while also still losing. We could see something fun like that.
Oh, brilliant.
So, with that, we have anything else that we would like to cover before we wrap things up here for our first half recap?
I think first half has gone well so far. There's been lots of battles, and I know I myself have enjoyed working with everyone I've worked with so far, and looking forward to the rest of them. Been a great season so far, and looking forward to what the rest of it will bring.
Absolutely. Michael, anything from you before we take off?
Yeah, I mean, kind of piggybacking off what Steve said, I think the best part of this season is getting to work with all these other coaches, getting to share, how you think of team building and how you think in battle, and see how your partners do the same. And it's just a fantastic opportunity to grow as a player and also to just appreciate, what everyone can bring to this surprisingly deep game.
Meeting of the minds for sure. I've really enjoyed this. It doesn't feel like there are only 3 games a week because there's so much that goes into not just our own team building, but each battle individually. Each turn you can dissect so deeply that it's something you can do maybe in doubles that isn't as easy to do in singles. So it's been a fantastic season so far. We've got another 3 weeks before our next buy and then another 3 weeks to close it out. So perhaps we'll end up doing another video similar to this during that buy, talk about the very close out of the season. But until then, we'll see you.